It's recording now.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the calling to order the Tuesday, August 4th meeting of the Balboa Reservoir Community Advisory Committee. Item number 1 is the call to order and the roll call. So let me call roll real quick. Michael Ahrens.
Present.
Peter Tam.
Present.
Bridget Davila.
Here.
Christine Godinez-Beck. She's still on parental leave. Amy O'Hare.
Here.
Maurice Rivers.
Here.
Excellent. Mark Tang.
I'm here too.
All right. And John Winston. I'm here. That's the roll call. Opening of meeting, item number 2. Has everybody had a chance to look at the meeting minutes from the last meeting?
Yeah, John, Mike Ahrens, I've read them and I think they're quite good. So
Would you like to move that they get approved?
I move to approve them.
I second that.
All right. All in favor? Let me just call the roll. Michael Ahrens,
Yes.
Peter Tam,
Aye.
Bridget Davila,
Yes.
Amy O'Hare,
Yes.
Maurice Rivers. Maurice, are you?
Yes.
Okay. Mark Tang.
Yes.
And I say yes as well. So it's unanimous. That was easy. Meeting overview. As you may or should know, there will be a meeting on the 11th of the Board of Supervisors, the final meeting of this this project before it gets approved. And so we are now, before that happens, there have been a few amendments to the DA, and we're going to discuss them today. So that brings us to item 3. Is there anything else that anybody would like to say in terms of general updates, meeting overview?
John, can I chime in for a second?
Sure.
Just wanted to put a plug in for sort of future CAC meetings, and that we're, this is, as John mentioned, kind of the last meeting before the board, the full board meets next week, but that, the CAC is scheduled through next year, and we're kind of thinking through what that looks like going forward, and also putting out a request for content and, subjects to discuss. So wanted to flag that for everybody's attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a few items. I think we need to have at least 1 or 2 meetings about public space, and at least 1 or 2 meetings about design, and anything else anybody wants to add to that would be great. Okay, we're going to have item 3, review of development agreement amendments. It's a discussion item. And I understand that Jen Lowe is in the house and would like to speak. I don't see her.
Yes, Jen will be joining. I'm trying to see if she has logged on.
I actually don't see her
Maybe
name.
a few minutes late.
All right.
But I'm happy to, I can share my screen and pull them up, and I can also give folks a little bit of a summary of
Okay.
what those are.
Before you do that, let me just mention that I guess I'm sharing my screen. I was going to mention also that on screen is the instructions on how to dial in for public comment if you're not able to do so on the Zoom. But I will relinquish that share and hand it over to you. Okay, Lee, it's all yours.
Okay, great. Okay, can everyone see it says Budget and Finance Committee, Balboa Reservoir Summary of Amendments. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Visible here.
Okay, good.
They're clear here too, Lee.
Great. Okay, so I will, I think what I'd like to do is, I don't have a formal presentation, and when Jen is able to join us, she will also contribute and we can talk through these. But really what we wanted to do today was be sure that we spent a little time explaining these key amendments that were presented by Supervisor Yee at last Wednesday's Budget and Finance Committee hearing, and give the CAC and the public an opportunity to ask questions about them, get clarifications, and make public comment on them. I can also talk about the process a little bit, what happens next. And so let me do that. I know that Jen is just logging on now too, so we can go through these in just a second. So Jen, I know that you are just logging on now. I was just explaining to the members that really the opportunity that we wanted to provide today was to give everyone a chance to ask questions. We can explain these amendments and the purpose of them. Folks can have conversation and ask questions. And I also just want to remind folks that, the development agreement contract is drafted by our city attorney. And so I really want to make sure we're focusing the discussion on really just the content of these changes, rather than we certainly can answer questions about the items that have specific language, but we're not, going through and talking about the language in particular. What we really would love is to solicit feedback on the content of the changes from the members and the public. And then in terms of the process, Supervisor Yee submitted these at last Wednesday's Budget and Finance Committee meeting. They will be incorporated into the development agreement, which will be published as part of the board packet for the meeting on August 11th. And the meeting on August 11th will include a whole number of Balboa items. So the project does have a CEQA appeal, which means that folks have submitted an appeal challenging the the content of the city's certification of the EIR. And the Board of Supervisors acts as the appeal body to consider that. Before the board can take any action on the project, so any of the proposed ordinances, the DA, the SUD, and all of those actions, the appeal first has to be considered. And so on the 11th, the agenda will include the Board of Supervisors considering the CEQA appeal and hearing that. And then subsequently, if depending on the outcome of that hearing, the legislation would be heard. And as just to remind you all, there's 4 pieces of legislation. So what Supervisor Yee presented last Wednesday would be amendments specifically to the development agreement. They're not legislative amendments. The development agreement ordinance itself is not amended. This is an amendment to the contract. And all of the board documents related to the DA are on the board file. There's a link on the CAC website that takes you right to the DA file on the Board of Supervisors website, and you can download the latest DA, you can download all the supporting documentation, as well as this document. So I'll leave it there in terms of the process. Before we go in and I kind of take you through some of these changes in particular, Jen, I think you've logged on. Is there anything you want to add in terms of talking through these amendments? If not, you can feel free to participate as I take everyone through them.
This is Jen from Supervisor Yee's office. No, thank you, Lee, for the summary, and perhaps we can walk through them and I can weigh in as necessary.
Okay, perfect. I also wanted to add that my colleague Sarah Amaral from the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development is here. That office was really integral in working on the affordable housing component of the development agreement on the project. And so we can have Sarah also explain some of these changes. So these are organized by general topic area. The first 6 of them, spanning the first 2 pages, have to do with the affordable housing plan. And this is where the most significant changes have been proposed. So number 1, I think, is one of the most significant changes that really came directly out of a lot of the discussions we've had with the CAC and the community. This will ensure that the city can have permanent affordability on the key affordable parcels, particularly the ones that the city will be contributing funding to. And so the change itself is that the developer will have a new obligation that once they've actually prepared the vertical parcels, the building pads for development, for the 3 affordable parcels that the city through the Mayor's Office of Housing will be contributing funding for, before those 3 buildings are actually getting ready to go into construction, at the point at which the Mayor's Office of Housing would be contributing the portion of their funding, the land of those 3 parcels will be conveyed to MoCD and then leased back to the developer. This will ensure that MoCD can hold those in permanent ownership and thus enforce permanent affordability. For number 2, this really focuses in specifically on the Educator parcel. The Educator parcel is going to be fully funded by the developer, and we've extended the required regulatory agreement to 99 years, which is what provides for the affordability. So that will be a 99-year regulatory agreement to maintain the affordability levels. And that gets recorded against the parcel as well. So 1 and 2 together, I think, can be looked at holistically as a way to address the concerns that all of the affordable housing in the project needs to be affordable in perpetuity. So these are the legal mechanisms that we can employ to further ensure that the affordability will be there permanently. Number 3 is an additional reinforcement that the developer's affordable obligation under the DA will be reinforced, that their commitment to provide 33% will not be amended. The Board of Supervisors would have to take major subsequent action to make any changes to that, and this clause further limits their ability to do so. Number 4 is another incentivization. So this would be a new schedule of performance added to the document to give specific milestones by which the developer would be needing to apply for permits, for subsidies, and all of the things they need to do, what's considered sort of pre-development work, all of the very detailed work they need to do to get everything ready for construction. We will now have a schedule that attaches milestone dates to those specific milestones, really, again, as a way to incentivize the developer to move the project forward as swiftly as possible so that the affordable housing can get built as swiftly as possible. This, of course, would dovetail with their proposed construction schedule. And then number 5 is something that, again, I think we have heard come up in public conversation. The development agreement previously included different AMI levels, so different affordability levels for all of the 550 affordable units that were consistent with what was in the CAC parameters. A little more than 1/3 of the units were required to be low income. almost another third were required to be moderate income. And then the final, about 1/3, could be any combination of low or moderate income. So those AMIs have been, the tranches have been adjusted slightly. So with this revision, there will be 50% of the units, of the 550 units, will be required to be low income, which is really consistent with, I think, a lot of the policy priorities we've heard in this community group, and the city's policy priorities to really serve the low income population. That moderate income tranche will stay the same at 30%. That's what it was, and that's consistent with the parameters. And then the remaining 20%, again, can be a combination of low or moderate. And then the final change related to affordable housing is to broaden the neighborhood preference area to really make sure we're incorporating all of the surrounding neighborhoods. Neighborhood preference is an ordinance that was passed by the city a number of years ago, which says that about 40% of the units of any of the affordable units built can be offered or must be offered as a first preference to people living nearby. And the point of this is really to make sure that people who live in the area of any particular affordable housing development have a chance to stay in that neighborhood. And so that will apply to this project, just like any other project around the city. The radius, the way the code defines your neighborhood, is a 1/2 mile radius. But we went ahead and looked at the map. We looked at the neighborhoods that are represented on this CAC. We looked at the kind of the communities that have been participating in the process and have expanded that radius to a 1.15 mile buffer to really make sure we're targeting all of Ingleside, all of the neighborhoods around. I also should mention that all of Supervisorial District 7 is already in this area. And so it captures a broader swath of District 11, so to the south of the parcel, to make sure that we're capturing just, again, the whole range of communities that have that will be impacted by this project, that will benefit from this project. So moving on to a couple of different topic areas, the child care program will be amended to create a new obligation requiring that the developer lease the child care facility to an operator at a nominal rent, so $1 annual rent. This will further support and ensure that the operator will be a nonprofit. There's already requirement in this that Supervisor Yee worked on early on, which is that the operator be a nonprofit and that 50% of the seats be reserved for children of low-income families. So this addition to ensure that the nominal rent will just further reinforce those other priorities. On the open space plan, we are making a few changes to make sure that we're including public participation, and advisory roles in the open space management and programming, ensuring that there's equal representation in the homeowners association, which will likely be responsible for maintaining the open spaces. And similarly, number 9 on this list, ensuring that once the project is underway in its implementation phases, that there's a little bit more clarity around the public engagement component and sort of making sure that the developer has some clear instructions and obligations around community participation in an ongoing way. So particularly during implementation and construction of the project, and then certainly as it relates to the open spaces, having to do with the programming and the management, making sure there's a forum for those kinds of discussions to happen. I sort of tangentially mentioned this, but number 10 similarly really just focuses on the construction period and making sure that the developer is committing, not just promising, but committing by putting it in the DA to using best practices in construction, both to mitigate, for any sort of air quality impacts, noise impacts, being good neighbor, being a good neighbor, and I would also say having robust coordination with the public. So having points of contact. Specifically, this is related to the construction period. And then number 11, related to transportation, is really just we are working with the MTA to acknowledge the investments that they have planned for the area that you have heard presented. And I know is of great interest to folks here to really make sure we can move those projects forward. The K-Line, Muni Quick Build, the intersection safety improvement at Frida and Ocean. Making sure that all of those are kind of put in here as in a more detailed way, so that the city has some sort of stake in this document to make sure we can move those projects forward. Acknowledging how important they are, not directly a responsibility or an obligation of the developer, but obviously very vital and important and related to this project. So, and I'm sorry if my scrolling is making people dizzy, but I'll stop doing that. That is the universe of the amendments that Supervisor Yee has presented and were adopted by the committee. And so those are being incorporated into the document and again will be published as part of the board packet prior to the meeting on the 11th. What I would love to do is I'll stop talking. If the members have questions, we can address specific questions. We can talk about any of these that you have comments on, and then do the same and take public comment. So I'll leave it there and happy to explain more.
I have questions.
So John, you can do your.
Right. Is there any more comment from the mayor, from the supervisor's office, Jen, before we go to the committee?
We can go ahead and have the committee ask questions and I'll weigh in as needed.
Okay, so what we'll do, I guess, is go around the committee. I guess we can do it by raised hand, and then after that, we'll go to the public comment, and then maybe we'll do a quick swing through the committee again. So, Bridget, you're recognized.
Okay, thank you so much for going over that, and big thank you to Supervisor Yee for drafting those. I know those were a lot of concerns. I have some questions about them, and I didn't do it by number, I'm sorry. But regarding the neighborhood reach, you said that these would be available to people living in all of District 7. Is it as well as the entire District 11, or only in a radius from the development?
The way the code is written is that the entire district in which the project is located,
Right.
it has that preference.
Right.
And then in addition, it's a half-mile radius. This has been expanded to a 1.15 mile radius.
Oh, I see. That's how you include District 11 to the east then.
And to the south, exactly.
Okay, and to the south. And I guess also District 8 would be included in there as well?
Likely not. District 7 really embodies most of within a wide swath around the north and
okay. Okay. And then my other question was regarding the public participation regarding the open space management. And this was a concern to City College as well. So we were very glad to see that there. And we had include a statement about that in the proposed MOU from City College. Because what we are concerned about is our students are old, young, Black, white, Asian, Latino, Filipino. They are really very diverse, and we were concerned about students using the open space and then having the police called on them because they don't belong or something. So we wanted to have some provision in there, and that goes towards that idea. I think Supervisor Walton also addressed this with the Karen Act. So we might just, I think we mentioned that in the MOU. But I was very glad to see that there. And then the other thing is the transportation. So the transportation has always been a little bit vague to me. I've heard the MTA come in and say what they're hoping to do. And then I've heard a lot of people come in and say what they're hoping to do, but it appears extremely vague. And that's a big concern for City College, because we would like to rely more on public transportation, but what has recently happened with many lines being cut back is, well, we don't know what's going to happen in the next year even. So, so trying to figure this out, I'm wondering what is going to be done concretely around transportation.
Well, just to be brief, because this is a large topic, and thank you for that comment. I do, I've also participated in all of these discussions, so I absolutely understand how vital and important the issue of transportation is. Just very quickly, the project itself, so the developer under the DA has a number of obligations that they will be committing to. So they will be required to do transportation demand management, which is aimed at ensuring that the users of their own project, residents, visitors, are incentivized to travel without their car. The project is building 0.5 to 1 parking spaces. So not every unit will have a dedicated space. That's another great way to incentivize non-auto use. The project will be doing a number of physical improvements to the site that will encourage safer streets for pedestrians, safer streets for bicycles, and provide new access ways in and around the area. So in particular, Lee Avenue will finally be connected down to Ocean Avenue. Lee Avenue will get a protected bike lane. And there will be additional paseos and pedestrian ways to connect folks who live at the northern, to the north of the site down to Ocean Avenue safely. In addition, the project is required to fund a number of transit signal improvements and bus boarding island improvements along Ocean Avenue as part of a required mitigation. So they are required to fund a portion of those improvements to the MTA. The MTA is responsible for installing those improvements. And then finally, the developer is obligated to provide up to 450 public parking spaces and is permitted to negotiate special rates with the college. So all of those are in the sphere of what the developer is obligated to do in the realm of transportation, which is a really multifaceted and kind of robust package of what the developer is able to do to improve the situation in their area. Number 11 is really meant to address, I think, again, the fact that Ocean Avenue, City College, Balboa BART, the K line, those are all pre-existing to the project, and have their own concerns. People, there's traffic issues in the area. All of that exists kind of a little bit separate from this proposed project. So this proposed project is doing all of the things I just talked about to mitigate their own impact and to improve the environment in the ways that they can. What the MTA will be doing is a Muni quick build on the K line, which will be implemented in the next 2 years to improve transit service for the K, make sure it moves faster, doesn't get stuck in traffic. They will be implementing safety improvements to the intersection around Geneva, Frida Kahlo, and Ocean, really targeted specifically at pedestrians and bikes to make sure, particularly for City College residents, anyone walking from BART up into the neighborhood, that intersection is really not pedestrian friendly.
Nope.
So really focused on that. And then, continuing coordinating with the college as you build out the Student Success Center. You'll be widening that corner of Frida and Ocean, creating a plaza, moving back your retaining wall. So making sure we're coordinating with you to enhance that pedestrian access. And then, again, working with the developer's fair share contribution to make some additional transit signal modification updates to improve transit flow.
I can just add, I think the K just got its service cut. So it now stops and lets everybody off before going downtown, or so. I mean, these are the
I'm
things
not
that
sure what the COVID, I know the MTA has made some dramatic changes.
right. And do we know that it's coming back, or do we know? I mean, this has serious implications for City College and students getting there, because if the transit's not working, then people are going to rely on something else.
I'm happy to put you in touch with the MTA directly. I mean, I can't speak to their service plans given their COVID reality. What I can say and what they have confirmed is that the two MTA projects I just cited are still they're still happening. So the COVID situation has not changed those two projects.
Thank you.
John, if Bridget is done, I have some comments.
We're raising hands. So I got Amy up next. And
John, how do you raise hands? Like this?
No, and the under your start video button, there's a, no, where is it? It's under
Well,
right in.
Can you just remember, I raise my hand on my screen? Whenever it's my turn,
I will try to do that. Okay, why don't you go ahead, Michael? You go first, and then
Okay.
then Amy, and then
Amy can go first if she wants. Okay, well, I'll go. First, I want to thank President Yi and Jen Lowe for these changes. I think every one of them are fantastic, and every one of them are help the project. And I'll go through each of them. I'll try to go quickly, but I'll speak slowly. The number one, I think it's a very good addition. It has specific language, and I think it's great. Number two, same thing. It has specific language of the amendment, and it's good. It's a good specific amendment. Number three, again, it's a specific amendment, and that's what I think we should be seeing is the language of the amendment, because we're here to comment on the language of the amendment. And I think the language is fine, but I have to comment that this is to meet the comment of President Yi and Supervisor Peskin. They said that they don't want any amendments. They don't want the developer coming back. But I have to tell you, and you can check with your lawyers, the city, this is not enforceable. You cannot have an agreement not to amend a document. It's simply not enforceable. So if anybody's relying upon it, if the developer says they're not going forward for this reason because they can't get financial commitments or something, there's no agreement that you can't amend a document. It's just not legally enforceable. But we'll move on. It'll obviously give somebody comfort. Number four is very important. Number four says that you're going to include a provision and a schedule that will prevent delay. Yet we don't have any language. This is, I think, following up on the supervisors Peskin and I think Supervisor President Yi to say we're going to include a provision to use it or lose it. But it's uncertain what this provision is about. You really need to see the language of the document. And I have a lot of questions about what that document will say. So I don't think we should be approving anything. I don't think the supervisors should be approving anything until you can see the written amendments to this development agreement. Under paragraph 11.2 of the development agreement, there's a right of the developer to commence construction within 5 years of the effective date. Are they going to keep that right under 11.2? We don't have any language. Under paragraph 6 of the development agreement, there's a provision that there shall be no development obligation in favor of the developer. Is that language going to be amended, or is it going to stay the same? We don't know. Under the purchase and sale agreement, paragraph 10, there's a provision for liquidated damages. This, in essence, gives to the developer an option in this property. They don't have to buy it. they can get title to the property, and still they can give it back within 5 years with a deed in lieu of foreclosure. There's very nominal liquidated damages under paragraph 10 of the purchase agreement. And that is, if they breach under the purchase agreement, they can basically walk for the property and retain only the $500,000 deposit, what's called the initial deposit. And then every year after that, for 5 years or 4 years, there's a meager $400,000 deposit. They don't have any obligation to pay the $11.4 million. So is this language being changed? We don't know. So I submit that this should be resubmitted to this committee at some stage for a further review of the exact language, because I think it's a good idea to use it or lose it, but I'm not certain which paragraphs are being changed or which language are the change. So I think that this should be brought back to the CAC at a future meeting to look at the language and it's not only the members such as me and such as others on the committee, but the public is going to be making comments. So we can't tell what you're doing here without knowing the language of the agreement. So that's my comment on number 4. Comment on number 5, same comment. It's uncertain what you're doing here. I agree with the concept, but we should see the language and where the changes are going to be made. Item number 6 is a precise written change in the documents, giving us the language, and I like it. That's good. So I have no criticisms of that. Number 7, the child care program. Again, that's a precise amendment to the document, and I think it's beneficial, and so I have no comments on that. Number 8, ensure that publicly, I think this is a great idea. It's uncertain, so I would like to again request that you show the CAC and the public the actual written document that's going to be modified and where it's going to be modified. Somebody made a comment. This addresses somebody's comment that basically this encourages segregation, that there's things in the deal that encourage segregation. I forget who made it, but one of the members of the public made that comment. And I agree that this should be revisited. This takes one step in doing that. So I think it's a very good idea to have this participation, have the public have a right to have says in this, but I do think we need to see the language. This does not address, though, I don't think it addresses the other portion of segregation that I think is bad with the project. I didn't make the comment, but a member of the public did, to the effect that the establishment of all the affordable housing in one building is de facto segregation, and it's against what the city has done in other projects and what the city has suggested. So that's my comment on number 8. On numbers 9 and 10, both of those are very good comments, and I agree with them 100%, but again, we'd like to see the language. The last comment is on transportation. I agree that, again, I'd like to see the wording of the document, but I agree that there should be a mention of the city's investment on the transit improvement, but it should be more than a mention. There should be some concrete decisions that we haven't seen. The words today was robust package was used. The word today is we're hoping certain things change. I think there should be some concrete commitments to transportation. Right now, I think we all agreed in our annual report that we gave in December of last year, we commented that there are no real concrete recommendations or changes made by the city. Member Davila, Trustee Davila, just said earlier, and I agree, the K line is a nightmare right now. And I participated, or I didn't participate, I listened to the SFMTA presentation, and all it was hopes and dreams with no concrete changes. In fact, the new head of the SFMTA said that there's some permanent damage being done to the system that may never be repaired. So we really need more of a concrete commitment. Also, the April 2020 presentation by this developer is vague, ambiguous, with no commitments. It's things that we'll do in the future, no dollar commitments to a TDM. If we're going to have a TDM, we need one that has teeth in it, and this one doesn't. So if you're going to be changing that, if the developer is going to change their April 2020 TDM to have concrete changes, to put dollars in there, to have commitments for things like transit passes, shuttles, and other things that have been discussed, then I 100% support that. But again, it's vague. So again, I thank you very much, Jen Lowe, who's on the phone, and President Yee, for addressing these issues. It goes a ways to accomplish a lot in this, but there's still a lot more to be done. And I think we need to see the language of the agreements so that this committee and so that the public can make a true commentary on all of it. Thank you, John, for allowing me the time to make those comments.
Okay. In order to raise your hand in Zoom, you go to the participants list. You can open that up and you can click on in the left of the 3 columns and you can put your hand up. That goes for the public too when we start calling up public comment. But for now, let's go to Amy. You have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to see the permanence, the in perpetuity issue addressed. That's been a kind of perennial concern of people at least in the Sunnyside group. And it looks solid. I appreciate that being addressed by President Yee's office. I hear Mike's comments about the insufficiently binding qualities of some of the changes, which I can't really address. It's not something I know anything about. But in terms of intention, I definitely support the number 4, the schedule of performance. I remember having a conversation with President Yee, it must have been 2 years ago, when he mentioned this, and I thought, oh, that sounds like a great idea. That's just what you want. You want a concrete list of things that are going to be done and when they're going to be done. And so the whole construction process is understood and transparent. And I'm so glad to see it in these amendments. It was a great idea. And I feel like he followed through on that. And I'm also happy to see the increase in low-income units. It seems a good in these times a good improvement. I want to just address number 8, the publicly accessible open space being managed with public input. First of all, this is glaring to me because Sunnyside Neighborhood Association is not a homeowners association. We very particularly include renters in our neighborhood. And here it says require equal representation in the homeowners association by all buildings on the site. And I assume that's just an error, that really what's intended is a neighborhood association, because obviously the vast majority of people who will live at the project, the Balboa Reservoir, will be renters. So I just want to make sure that there is some kind of provision for an association which is based on people living there, not on owning a home, which of course would be a very small percentage of the people who are in the project, and that representation isn't based on, again, any kind of segregation, but that it intends to bring together people from all the different buildings, coming from all different income levels, whether they're renters at market rate or renters at low income rate, for whatever neighborhood association is formed for the project later. So I definitely support that, but want to make sure that's somehow cleared up here. On number 10, the commitments regarding the construction, I just want to reiterate something that Sunnyside has mentioned a few times, and that's that we would like to have real-time information on noise and air quality measurements that are being done in the course of construction. I don't know if it would end up in the DA, but somehow we would like to see that commitment from the developer that they would be able to provide publicly accessible information about levels of noise and air pollution during the course of construction. And that is part of their commitment to reduce impacts is to also allow the public to see, what levels are being generated by the construction itself. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. If anybody else wants to raise their hand, I see Mark Tang has his hand raised. Is anybody else going to speak after him? Now's the time to raise your hand. So Mark, would you like to go ahead? Oh, I wanted to say before that the neighborhood association, I think in item 8, they're talking about homeowners associations by all buildings on the site. I think they're talking about the people on the site of the construction, but maybe we need to expand on that. Mark Tang, go ahead, please.
Thanks, John. And I think I agree with most of the previous speakers. I see most of these as all improvements, and thanking President Yee and staff for listening to the community and proposing these amendments. Most of my comments are actually questions, so I'm not sure if they can be answered, but I'll just go down the list of things I have questions on. First, I'm assuming the language has not been finalized, or else they would have been shared here. And is there a tentative date that the language will be finalized? To Michael and Amy's points, I think that there's a lot of wordsmithing that can go on here, and we just want to, I think, make sure that some of these commitments are actually end up in the amendments. My second question is if you guys could explain a little more on the affordability, especially for the educator housing. There's something in there that says something about 99 years of affordability for the educator housing, and that's not permanent. So I don't know if that's a restriction on the regulation, but maybe just some clarity on how that was derived, the 99-year affordability requirement. Next question is on the fourth one. Is there a penalty so this is on the milestones and the timelines. Is there a penalty for not keeping up with those milestones? So say they miss one, is that a ding on them? You mentioned that that was an incentive to get them to get the project started earlier. So I just kind of wondering if there's a stick on the other side to penalize them for not meeting that schedule. For the childcare program, has it been established what the capacity of the childcare facility is currently? It's just for my information to know how big that is and how much of the community you'd be able to serve. And then finally,
Mark,
100
seats.
100. Oh, perfect. Okay, that's easy. Thanks. And then the last question is for the construction and the commitments. Are the commitments just the de minimis, what the regulations require, or are there additional commitments that are being proposed? I think that goes back to the language of this amendment to be able to see what those commitments are. And I would really encourage some flexibility in that beyond meeting beyond what the minimum requirements are, because some of the comments like Amy just mentioned, the fence line monitoring and that sort of thing, that could be written into the amendment that's too restrictive, saying that if that's not allowed. So I would encourage the language to be more flexible to allow some of these additional ideas from the community. That's it.
Lee, would you like to take on some of those questions? Were you taking notes?
Yeah.
Or Jen?
Sure. Okay, so yes, to Mark's couple of questions. So yeah, 100 seats in the childcare, that was an easy one, which is why I jumped in. In terms of the next steps on these amendments, we are working on them this week, and they will be posted at the end of the week and distributed as part of the board packet. So I will make sure to email the CAC with that updated document as soon as it's ready. So I will definitely do that later this week, so that everyone has a chance to review it. And then in terms of I'm taking your questions out of order, Mark, but in terms of the schedule of performance that lists out milestones, yes, if they don't hit the milestones, it's considered a default under the contract. And so it is a new obligation that they have to meet. And again, this will, as I'm sure you're aware, construction and projects like this require a lot of subsequent city permits, approvals. And so what this schedule of performance really is tailored to is the items in the developer's control. So they have to have applied for their subdivision map by certain times, things like that, and put in there as obligations that they would be in default if they haven't met. There's obviously remedies in the contract about, being able to cure a default, but it loops back to all of the typical clauses that are already in the contract about default and curing that default. Your question about the educator housing for 99 years, and my colleague Sarah Amaral is here too. I think what I would say is most all real estate contracts have to envision a life of a building, and I would say 99 years is essentially permanent. That is, just in terms of a convention of talking about length of time that a building could feasibly be existing, most real estate contracts use 99 years so that there is some specificity in the contract. So it's not, 99 is not specific to an educator building. It's specific to the way real estate contracts are drafted to confer the idea that 99 years is sort of this permanence. Sarah, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about the regulatory agreements.
Well, I think that covered, thank you, Lee. I think that actually covered it, that there is the federal limitation of perpetuity at 99 years for contracts. But in addition to that, what we could do is certainly we're putting on a regulatory agreement or a notice of special restriction that will allow us to be made aware to any changes or questions within our title, which essentially will allow us to further restrict even greater lengths than 99 years. So for instance, in the event that 99 years comes up, the building is still working, we will have documented in the 99-year notice of special restriction that we are able to extend that if we needed to. So we're continuing to look at the opportunity to extend it further within the realms of the law. So we will continue to do that as we move forward.
Yeah.
For the record, Sarah, you're from the city attorney's office, correct?
No, I'm from the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, good.
Yep, that's okay.
Thank you.
Sarah? Yeah, it's hard to answer the question without getting into kind of contract law, but it's this is a typical 99 years is sort of a typical approach to real estate contracts that, as Sarah mentioned, our NSR is recorded against the title, so we have the ability to then be able to renew that. And then in terms of the construction commitments, I think that probably the developer is better suited to talking about, their approach to construction. Joe or Kirsten, I'm not sure if you guys want to weigh in, but by including this in the DA, we are able to, I think, have them both reiterate their commitments that are already required by code, as you indicated, Mark, but also kind of outline their above and beyond commitments related specifically to outreach, making sure that the communication is happening. On the subject matter itself, though, I would need to defer to them. Hey, Joe, are you available? Maybe we can loop back with Joe after we've gone through a couple of other member comments.
If it sounds good to me, thanks for all the answers.
Sure.
I don't see, Peter Tam
and
has
actually,
his hand raised, and, go ahead.
John, I'm sorry. I don't, a number of folks talked about the open space, so I wanted to also just respond to that. The development agreement lays out a whole number of layers of oversight and regulation related to the open spaces. The city will be recording a declaration of restrictions, which will be a permanent public access and declaration. It will allow us to enforce a whole host of operating rules and regulations that the city enforces on its own parks, particularly non-discrimination, operating hours, rules of conduct. And so from the get-go, the intent of this park is to act as a public park. By overlaying our declaration of restrictions, we are able to then ensure all of the enforcement and operation of it as a public park in line with all of the rules and regulations that we would apply and enforce on our own parks. In addition to that, the developer is already required to have annual meetings to discuss park operations and regular reporting to the city about the management of that. It's anticipated that a homeowners association would take on the obligations to maintain and operate the park. And that change that was cited in this document is to further reinforce that the homeowners association will be represented by all of the units in the project pro rata. So I just wanted to explain a little bit of what's already in the document. We'll be making even further changes about ensuring some broader public participation.
Chair Winston, do you mind if I interject? This is Jen Lowe with Supervisor Yi's office. I had my hand up, but
Yes, I was going to get to you. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Oh yeah, I just want to add, it is really confusing, and I have to say, even with the supervisors, because the way that homeowners association is referred to in the document is very different from how we understand it. So I was hoping that maybe Joe or Kristen could explain that, because at face value, you think of an HOA very similar to how we have it here with Westwood Park and other types of enclosed developments. Here, I think it means the folks that are actually basically paying for the maintenance of the park, which also includes the affordable housing buildings. And I just wanted to have them explain that so that people can understand that contextually. And then secondly, what we aim to do with this amendment is to ensure that it's not just the HOA or the owners that would necessarily program or make decisions on the park and the open spaces. It would be like previously, like a neighborhood type of community approach that includes renters of the different buildings and hopefully community members as well. We would like to encourage them to, the CAC members or neighborhoods to be involved with that so that it feels more inclusive and that it is actually functions as a public park.
Hi, Jen, this is Kirsten, and I'll let Joe follow up, but I think I'm noticing in a lot of the conversations we're having where folks are really diving into the documents that the term homeowners association, people are thinking of something really different than how this site is set up. And basically the function of the homeowners association, as you just said, is really to help set the budget and really make sure that all of the common amenities that we've designed and committed to delivering, the community room, the park, a lot of the pedestrian pathways are maintained and operated in a way that works for the residents of the site and the general public. But really the role of the homeowners association is so that Bridge, Mission Housing, Habitat for Humanity residents, Avalon, and also, the townhome residents can all have a forum in which the budget is set and we make sure we're doing all of our due diligence and all of our business commitments to really running those public facilities and anything else we own in common. So we have been working with the board members to make sure that there is also public interface in less of the whether we should cut the grass with this company or that company, and more of the programming and making sure the space is accessible to City College folks, to neighborhood folks. And we're talking about the community room and the park mainly at this point. So there is that process that we've been working through. And Joe, you've been working closely on that if you want to add more.
Sure. No, I mean, I think that was good.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, and it would be nice also to have more participation maybe from the neighborhood. I think Amy was talking about the neighborhood associations and the areas around the, Westwood Park and Sunnyside and whatever else neighborhoods there might be, and that would like to have a say in how the parks are programmed, or just various issues around the park, open space. I'll let Amy speak to herself, but I think that's what I understood.
No, actually, I meant the residents of the Balboa Reservoir project.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I would like to see more participation from the neighborhoods surrounding as well. I would think, because it's their park as well. But I don't know.
And just to chime in, I think the intent is both, is to have residents and then the wider neighborhood, as well as City College. City College has made a request to have some involvement, as Bridget mentioned, and that's something we're talking to them about. So yeah, the intention is for the sort of oversight function to be the broader neighborhood, basically a cross section of representatives for all the different users of the open space. That's different than what's called the HOA in the development agreement, which is, frankly, the folks who are paying the bill to maintain that open space.
Okay, I see it. Okay, we have one, Peter Tam is the last person holding his hand up. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, no, not at all. Thank you so much for the presentation and these amendments. I'm glad to see that there's a little bit more refinement in the production and protection of affordable housing for those that need it. My questions are for section 1. Since the amendment states that the developer will be conveying parcels A, B, and E back to the city, will that affect the purchase price and the purchase and sale agreement? And then my other question is part of section Amendment 5, where it's talking about the remaining 20% may be low or moderate income units, but what metrics are being used to determine which is the higher of the two needs, low or moderate income housing?
Peter, great questions.
There you go.
I'll answer the first question, and then Kirsten, you can weigh in on the AMI question. No, Peter, it won't affect the purchase price. The way this is set up is that the developer will be purchasing the land up front. They'll be responsible for all the improvements, all of the infrastructure, subdividing. And then at the point that those 3 parcels are ready to begin vertical construction, so for the buildings to actually start going up, they'll be conveying those back to the city for a nominal cost, so at no cost, and getting a long-term ground lease back in exchange. Kirsten, do you want to talk a little bit about your approach to the AMIs, and particularly for the 20% that's flexible to low to moderate?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think Bridge, Mission, and Habitat have been working really hard on meeting and exceeding the parameters in terms of affordability. And so I think the original affordability ranges, were looking for us to do low and moderate income, which is something that the city was really excited about. It's a hard nut to crack. Unlike any other income or traditional affordable housing, there isn't state or federal funding for those tranches. And so we've been working really closely to kind of hear what the community is interested in, and make sure that we're offering that full range. And so that's why we've offered those 2 tranches. There's the traditional low box, which goes up to 80% AMI. And then the second box, where we're talking about our moderate. In order for us to commit to funding 550 building 550 affordable housing and assembling all the funding that we need to do that, we really wanted a little bit of flexibility that enabled us to pivot towards, if the state programming is pushing us this way, or if we do a market survey and find that the needs in this neighborhood are, in a particular direction, we have the flexibility to really make sure the housing matches the needs and the sources. I think there was a really good conversation at the beginning of this meeting about the the benefit of really trying to make sure the housing gets built sooner. And one of those things is also offering that flexibility for us to chase the right sources and have access to whatever sort of sources that become available first and foremost. That said, I think we will be working very closely with the city, who is one of the main funders, to make sure that whatever we're proposing to build on this site, I know the Mayor's Office of Housing is here with us today, and Sarah will be involved in this project, or her predecessor, or someone from her office, to make sure that we're meeting the commitments of the agreement and that we are meeting the intent of serving a broad range. So that's a piece they have. And then there's a detail that I'm almost not wanting to get into, but I think it's really important to people, which is each of those bands, we have to hit an average income. So they're pretty broad ranges, but in order for us to hit that average, we have to have an equal distribution throughout that range. So we're not expecting like, oh, it's a 60, it's 30 to 80% AMI. All of the units will be in one spot. Maybe they'll all be at 80 or they'll all be at 30. That's not really possible because of that averaging mechanism. So not only is it our intent, but the way the city has crafted this agreement will be required to really provide housing at the full range that we're talking about, so 30 to 130.
Thank you.
Hey, John, you're on mute.
I thought I was unmuted the whole time. It's being really quiet. No more comments from any members of the committee. Seeing none, I will go to public comment. I'm going to go ahead and reserve my comments till the end. We'll do another round of comments to the committee for anybody who finds anything necessary to speak up on after public comment. So to do public comment, I think the thing you want to do is raise your hand in, do you know how to do it? I see Rita's got hers. Anybody else? You just go to your participants and look in the right-hand column and raise your hand. And I see two people, so we'll go to, I guess I'll call on them since it seems like it's working. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't, maybe, because I don't have control over the phone lines. Is that Sue who's handling the phone?
John, you're also a co-host, so if you want to call, you can do it.
I'm sorry, but I don't know how to do that on the phone part of the system.
John, this is,
you can just call the person's name who has raised their hand.
Okay, yes, but the people calling in on the phone lines on the AT&T, is that happening tonight? There's no AT&T bridge. And okay.
At this point, I don't see any phone number.
In that case, we'll go to, was Rita, did you have your hand up? Are you muted? Okay, we'll come back to Rita in a minute. How about Jean Barish?
Thank you very much. Is there a time limit or do I have?
2 minutes. We'll give you 2 minutes.
Oh, well, I hope I can say everything in 2 minutes. I guess I'll have to prioritize. First of all, I'm delighted that you're reviewing this, and I very much appreciate President Yee's cooperation in revising the development agreement. But that said, I still have a few comments. Number one, I'd like to concur with all of the concerns that Mike Ahrens and Amy O'Hara expressed about the vagueness in many of these statements, and I hope those can be specified better by the time the final agreement is made. I'm also especially concerned about the lack of specificity regarding transportation. We've been through this a lot. I've commented on it a lot. I just want to mention it again. There isn't enough specificity about the importance of improving public transportation. Another comment I'd like to make is that several people, including me, have expressed some concerns about the fact that this project segregates people. It has de facto segregation because all of the affordable units and the residents of the market rate units will be in different buildings. And this is counter to the policy of the city's inclusionary housing policy, but it doesn't seem as though, despite some comments that have been sent to the supervisors and made in public, this has been addressed in these revisions to the development agreement. I think it's very important that this is considered. I understand it would take a lot to change the development agreement and perhaps even the design of the project, but it would otherwise create what's known as a poor door community or poor door development. And I think that would be unacceptable to many people in the city and of great concern to many of the decision makers in the city. I hope you'd consider that. And if I have time, I'd also like to mention that Section 1 has what appears to be a waiver that's not trivial, which says that the developer will deed back affordable housing parcels. However, this can be waived by the director of MOHCD in the director's sole discretion. It seems to me that takes all the teeth out of this deed back, and I'm very concerned about that. I'd like to request that that waiver be eliminated from the revised development agreement. Thank you.
Good timing. Since I already called on Rita Evans, how about you go next, Rita, please? Rita, are you, can't hear Rita. Says you're unmuted. All right, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to make sure your microphone is working. Check your sound on your Zoom sound control panel. In the meantime, I'll come back to you, Rita. How about we go to Stephen Martin Pinto?
Okay, just a couple of things really quick. I think this COVID thing has really changed a lot.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah. I just went to Stephen. We'll get you next, Rita. Thank you. Stephen, your 2 minutes is going to start again.
Okay, thanks. So a couple of things. With the COVID changing the Muni, I think a lot of this project kind of depended on the presence of public transportation being there to include the Muni and the BART. But now, since we've seen a 40% reduction in Muni service and the K line being through-routed with the L line, and BART is not exactly looking very good these days, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of service cuts to that as well with ridership down and the reticence of people to use it because of social distancing concerns, and even just the general safety of BART too. It has not been a very safe mode of transportation for a lot of people. So I think we really need to look hard again at the public transportation aspect of this project and really consider, are people going to use it as much as we planned they were? Because I don't think that's going to be necessarily true anymore. And because of that fact, we're going to be using more cars, whether they drive them or use Uber and Lyft, they're going to be using cars. So that really is going to change a lot of the way the assumptions that were made about traffic and traffic flow. So I really would strongly urge the people to consider that. Thank you.
Okay. Rita, are you there? Want to try you again? Rita Evans.
But now, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're
okay. I apologize for the technical issues, and I will say that I think it speaks to some of the issues I brought up before about the difficulty in public participation for some of us when we're confronted by a technical barrier like this. I would like to say that the development agreement does outline a monitoring program for parts of the transportation demand management framework that involves data reporting, but there's no mechanism that require that measures within the framework actually be implemented. If congestion isn't relieved, if parking is a nightmare, if pedestrians and cyclists can't travel safely, there's no requirement that any action be taken by the city or the developer. There's just this data collection and monitoring and measurement. If public transit is unable to attract new residents and the transportation planning for the Balboa Reservoir project proves to be completely unrealistic, there's no requirement that the city or developer do anything to address that. Funds from the developer, the city, or both must be dedicated to ensuring that the framework is carried out and modified as needed over time. I think this again gets into the need for much more specific commitments on a variety of areas that seem to be danced around repeatedly, one of them being the fact that there's no mention of a developer-funded shuttle, something that the neighbors have continued to ask for throughout this entire planning process, and at least a commitment from Avalon Bay to share in the cost of a public-private initiative to operate a shuttle. There's no existing or projected Munich service into the project area, a necessity of public, and that's just going to be necessary to get any new residents to even consider using public transit and compete against private vehicles and private services such as Uber, particularly in a pandemic or post-pandemic world. We've got to have the solution to this last mile problem. Thank you.
Okay. Shaheen.
Oh, hi. So I think these are all positive amendments. I'm a neighbor in Ingleside, across the street from the development, so I hope the CAC will support them. In particular, I like that the land will be deeded back to MOHCD. I think that's pretty important. I agree with other commenters that some of the transportation projects seem underspecified. On the other hand, I know that every one of SFMTA's improvement projects has timelines that are measured in years to accommodate technical work as well as their own community feedback and engagement processes just like this one. So I think it would be wrong to ask either developer or this committee or the development agreement to preclude that SFMTA community engagement process. It really makes sense to leave those projects open to community engagement in the future. The SFMTA has a website on the Frida Kahlo Ocean Geneva intersection project for anyone who's interested. Outreach is beginning this fall. I hope everyone who's concerned about transit in the area and in this project will participate in that engagement. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think it could benefit from everyone's perspective. I disagree that COVID means a shift from transit to cars. The KL interlining actually increases transit access to CCSF. Previously, students in the Sunset didn't have a one-seat ride to CCSF, and now they do. BART, on the other hand, continues to offer much faster ride from downtown than the K ever did. So I think that's a great development. And the K and the 29 go straight from the project to BART. I'm not sure what additional capacity a shuttle would provide, although I certainly wouldn't oppose one if someone wanted to provide it for free. So in any case, I'm pretty excited about the project still. I think these are all positive amendments. I hope the CAC supports them. Thank you for your time.
Okay, everybody's keeping to 2 minutes. Christine Hansen, you're next.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, it's an improvement that the affordability of the affordable units has been increased. When will agreements between the developer and MOCD about deeding the affordable land be drafted and signed? There are unfortunately still many things that continue to be ignored in the DA that will have impact on both City College and the community surrounding the reservoir. The developer has identified a period of time when there will be no parking available for City College students and staff access. That period would be a great opportunity for the developer to fund a pilot BART shuttle program, which we might find is miraculously cheaper than what had been estimated earlier. As transportation stands now, this development will drive more students away from City College, which has already been impacted by the class cancellations to the point that other colleges in the area are thanking our teachers for sending students their way. This project will simply ensure that the hole the school has been buried in for the last 8 years gets deeper and deeper. The amendments also fail to note that City College Board of Trustees has stated in multiple formats that they do not want North Street to bisect City College property. The Academic Senate has passed a resolution stating the danger to pedestrians both in the parking lot and the difficult merge on the City College side, which has had no study in the EIR process other than stating in a variance it would make no difference. The development agreement continues to be allowed to assume somehow that this road will be moved. This assumption shows a nasty bias against the needs and concerns of the college that have been expressed not merely by 1 or 2 people, but by college institutions like the Academic Senate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Corey Smith, you're next.
Thanks, John. Two quick comments. First, on the transportation aspect. The Housing Action Coalition hosted an event with Jeffrey Tumlin back in May, talking about how COVID is going to impact transportation and transportation use in the future. And while there are a lot of unknowns, early data from around the world indicates that, number one, we've not seen any transmission on public transportation. And so we are certainly hopeful and optimistic, actually, that we will be able to get public transportation ridership back up to where it was previously and hopefully expand. That said, one of the things I know I've stressed at these meetings, as well as to the project team privately, is how important the transportation aspect and the pedestrian experience between the station and the site is to the overall progress. The TDM measures are something that's probably worth diving into for the residents that are interested, because it really does lay out a lot of the details in a fact-driven way about how we can incentivize people to take public transportation and get out of their cars. And so there's a lot of really fantastic stuff in there. The other part is the comments about exclusion. And that's certainly something that our organization thinks about. Fortunately, we know that the affordable developers in this project are experts in integrating communities, and Avalon's got a history of doing that as well, and making sure that everything is, truthfully mixed income, mixed, racially, culturally, socioeconomically. But there's still plenty of other aspects of our city which intentionally divide residents from one another. One of the ones that we talk about is zoning. And if anybody is interested in pushing for zoning reform, much of the outlying neighborhoods are zoned for single family homes, making it completely illegal to build apartment buildings. So anybody that cares about that, if you could reach out to me, I can drop my email into the chat. Would love to talk about how we can promote more inclusive rules around the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Madeline Muller, please go. Got to demute.
It's unmuted now, right?
Yes, you're in.
Okay.
Let me start you over.
Pardon?
I'm going to start you over again.
Oh, okay. I had a question about the amendments. I listened very carefully to all, what were they, 11 of them. I didn't hear the college mentioned once in the presentation. We are a huge neighbor, But the one I have a question about, where we were sort of mentioned, was number 6. That's the only one seemingly spelled out that says for neighborhood preference. And I think I read with all the crossouts, there's no more educator preference per se. I just need a question. It sounds like what little bit we had going in as perhaps educator preference now is not the case. And if it's not, and there's also neighborhood preference, who gets preference? It just seemed very confusing to me and not very happy. I'm not very happy about it. The other was the conversation about transportation, that, oh dear, the developer has really doesn't have to consider anything other than the transportation in the 17 acres. But for 75 years, those acres were leased to City College. It was part of our functioning college. And that's really the nitty gritty on this. If you take that many students and put them onto the streets, I think you do have a responsibility, not just to the people who live there, but the people who have been changed out from that particular unit. So I don't go with that particular argument. I just think more of the college concern from students all over the city. It's not just District 7, it's not just the neighborhood. We're talking about an institution that serves thousands, up to 30,000 people, to really get a life from all over San Francisco. I don't hear anyone, well, I do, I hear myself, but I don't hear enough voices speaking for that element of San Francisco. Thank you.
Okay, Brian Marabello.
Yes, hi, thank you very much for your time. So just 2 things to add. The EIR, indicates there will be no CCS parking on the Balboa Reservoir at all for an entire year during the initial construction. and the college can afford another hit to this access. The Reservoir partner developers must agree to provide temporary nearby parking and a shuttle to City College during any concurrent construction, which reduces or eliminates agreed upon public parking numbers on the Balboa Reservoir. Secondly, the developer agreement was clearly written with the approval of the developer, if not by them. There are too many ways for Avalon Bay to avoid its longstanding commitment to the Central Park and other open spaces. The developer and the city have used the park as a major selling point to surrounding neighborhoods, and having us influence design and use is a major reason there was any buy-in from Sunnyside. If the developer is financially or otherwise unable to complete the park and green spaces as committed, that land must be deeded back to the city. That's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. Unless anybody else would like to speak from via Zoom, is there anybody on the AT&T lines? Okay, we have Jennifer Hagee is here. Jennifer, you want to go? Jennifer, did you raise your hand? Oh, I think you're muted, Jennifer.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So it's a real concern that access methods to City College are already overburdened, and the proposed Balboa development threatens to overwhelm them. So to improve access, transit fixes are needed on both Frida Kahlo Way and Ocean Avenue between the Balboa Park BART station and Frida Kahlo Way. The developer contribution of $11 million does not come close to covering what is needed to ensure safe access to the development and City College from the BART station. It makes other needed improvements, but it's not really dealing with that area. Sunnyside has many recommendations for the already congested Frida Kahlo Way between Ocean Avenue and Judson, in particular, a major overhaul of the intersection at Frida Kahlo Way and Judson Avenue. Please include Sunnyside recommendations in the transportation section of the developer agreement. It's addendum number 11. We also ask you to evaluate alternative transportation measures. Is funding a TDM coordinator the best use of developer funds if nothing that coordinator does has teeth or the funds to implement programs? Can these funds be put to better use, such as a shuttle? Parking is going to be an important component of the multiple ways to access an education as well as this development. So I request that you add text to the developer agreement addendum number 4 for the periods of phase 0 and 2. Ensure that the developers provide alternative parking during those periods. Also, Sunnyside has concerns about the significant adverse environmental impacts of this development. We want to see electric battery backups instead of highly polluting diesel generators that are tested at each building regularly. Why pollute the area on a regular basis? And finally, many of our small businesses in Sunnyside will be impacted by the upcoming congestion. We want to ensure access and parking protections for the vans and trucks used in fixing your plumbing, HVAC systems, roofing, construction, and other small business operations. Help us to provide funding for needed special residential permit programs, or a program that allows our small businesses and our residents to survive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. We have a few more people now. Tomasita, you get your hand raised. Would you like to go next? Tomasita?
You just clicked to unmute me.
Oh, is Tomasita there? Okay, let's go with, who's that, Theo?
Okay.
We'll go with Theo next.
All right. So personally, sorry, Theodore Randolph. Okay. Personally, I'm not disturbed by the lack of specificity before anything is built. So I agree with Shaheen that the transit, according to community feedback over time, the transit at Balboa Reservoir right now is pretty good, considering that Tumlin is emphasizing quality over quantity, and there's still a lot of quantity at Balboa Park. But clearly, the lack of specifics is disturbing from people being able to buy into the visions. So I'm wondering if it's feasible to include examples from previous experiences of how vague promises of investments lead to concrete improvements in transportation and open space, or not, as the case may be. Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tomasita, you want to try again?
So, hello?
Yes, we hear you.
I understand when Lei Lutinsky was speaking, she said that
A little closer to the microphone, please.
Well, my nose is hitting the screen.
That's good, right there.
Lei Lutinsky said that the parking, that there was a parking would be provided for 450 spaces. The development agreement in the past has said up to 450 spaces, but the development will be displacing at least 1,007 spaces. And there was a Fair and Piers transportation report in March 2019 that said that if the two buildings that have been planned and funded by the voters for many years were built on the upper reservoir, on the upper lot, then the need for replacement parking would be on a normal day, 1,667 spaces, or there are about that. But at the minimum, on a slow day, 980 spaces. And this project will be severely impacting City College, which is not taken into account in the environmental impact report, and the developers cherry picked the numbers that they used in that report. But to be honorable, the minimum, the development should provide for new 980 parking spaces in their underground garages for the students of City College, who will have to deal with all of the negative impacts of this years of construction. And the least thing that should be definitely required is a minimum of 980 spaces of parking dedicated to reserved for the students from 8 in the morning until 10:30 at night on weekdays, and whatever time the classes are in session on weekends, because the damage to the project is immeasurable. And at least with human decency, 980 spaces minimum should be provided. Thank you.
Okay, I think that brings public comment to an end. I don't see any more hands up. Last chance, going once, going twice. Okay, with that, public comment is closed on this item. Do we want to go, I guess we'll go around the committee for one last, if anybody wants to get one last comment in after hearing public comment. Anybody want to raise their hand? Okay, seeing none, I will make a couple of comments. I've been to, I've lost count. I think there have been maybe 60 CAC meetings since we began. And I've been hearing comments on a lot of these subjects of these amendments over time. And a lot of people thought they were falling on deaf ears. Their comments were falling on deaf ears. Affordable housing in perpetuity, seems like that's covered. A lot of people ask affordable, but affordable for whom? Well, now we know, and it's affordable for 50% of the affordable of the 33% will be for low-income people. Open space concerns. We've been hearing a lot about how the open space should be, the connections, the programming. The seating back of the property and the leasing of the land underneath the buildings. Good developments, and will ensure affordability for what I would consider to be perpetuity. 99 years is a long time. Transportation is going to continue to be an issue. And it's going to continue to be an issue whether we build this project or not, and it's going to continue to be an issue after it's built, after it's completed. We have to, as a community, stay on top of this. We can't. I know that that COVID has crippled Muni. Muni is in the biggest crisis it's ever been in, and some of the lines that have been cut are not coming back. But we have to. We cannot assume that just because people don't want to they're afraid to take the subway or they're afraid to take the bus, that we should accommodate cars, because if all the people that ride subways now, that ride transit now, are going to be driving, then there's just not enough real estate in the world for all those cars. So I think we will probably have another in a series of meetings about transportation over the next 6 months, because we do need some specific goals for MTA to look forward to be able to transport all these people and all the people in the future post-COVID and during the COVID as well. The TDM, I agree with Rita Evans that monitoring the data of the TDM is not enough. We really do need to have some kind of accountability when things don't happen as they should, as far as people don't take enough transit. If we find that the TDM is not working in certain areas, we need to have some kind of teeth that can work on. That's how most TDM plans work, especially in educational settings, and I think in this setting too. As for the funding for transportation, the $11 million is quite a bit of money, and it's looking like, in this case, most if not all of that money will be spent right here at the point of impact, which is unusual for a project of any size. Usually that money just goes into the MTA general fund. In addition to that 11 million, we also have lots of other money that's available for Ocean Avenue and Geneva Avenue. Vision Zero, it's a high injury corridor, so there's Vision Zero money available. There's Prop K money. Caltrans can contribute. So there's a lot that can be done, and it's all possible. So so that's basically what I wanted to say. You know, that this committee is coming back to this committee as has been a clearinghouse for the opinions and needs and questions and concerns of the neighborhood. And now we see that a lot of what people's concerns have been accommodated in these amendments. Be really interested to see how the actual language comes out, and we'll see on the 11th. So with that, one more chance for anybody else on the committee to say anything. All right, general public comment. Anybody have any general public comment items that were not covered on the agenda today? Just raise your hand in the participants list. I'll give it a minute. Not seeing anything. Oh, no, not seeing anything yet.
John, I can address, I know there was a question about the neighborhood preference. So maybe while we wait for just a second, I can address that.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, it is a confusing layer of legislation and the way the DA is written. So the educator preference for City College for the educator building has not changed.
Yes.
That still exists. For the educator building itself, educators will essentially be the first preference, right? For the rest of the affordable buildings, the city's normal neighborhood preference ordinance will apply, which provides that 40% of the units in each of those buildings can be first offered to neighborhood residents, which is anyone who lives in District 7, plus a 1.15 mile radius around the project site, which will incorporate areas to the south and southeast. That 40% does get affected based on certain state subsidies. So the number 40% could fluctuate down to 20%, but the imperative thing to note is that the legislation is intended to give sort of an extra chance for people who already live in the neighborhood to have kind of a slightly higher priority. That doesn't mean that the city's general population of people needing and wanting to apply for affordable housing doesn't apply. We have all 550 units will obviously go through the cycle of lottery system after those preferences are taken into account. And we have, with 550 units, we have a huge opportunity to house a lot of people. And so the preferences are really just intended to serve those distinct populations as a first pass, but there will be ample need, and those units will go to people who can fulfill those. I also just wanted to echo what John said. I'm staffing this project, and I just appreciate so much how much time and energy this committee has taken to weigh in on the project and dig into the details. And just from a staff perspective, it's incredibly rewarding to work on a project that has so much community feedback. It really helps us work on a project that we know will benefit the community. So I just personally want to appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that too. So you're saying that I was going to mention educator preferences. So their educator preference hasn't changed. Still good. Okay. Okay. General public comment. We got Jean Barish up first.
John, I think Jen had her hands up, so maybe.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was starting at the top of the list. Please go ahead, Jen. Jen Lowe from Supervisor Yee's office.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Yes, I want to echo Lee's appreciation. I mean, things do not fall on deaf ears. We have all your comments and notes and minutes, and it's really appreciated. And that's the whole point. We want this to be an inclusive, iterative process. I just want to address some of the comments that were made during public comment. I think it was from Jean in regards to why this isn't like inclusionary housing. It isn't inclusionary housing. I mean, that's why from the very get-go, this project was based off a principles and parameters document that this CAC formulated. And that's why we have a development agreement. So it's different from other projects because it's not an inclusionary housing project. There's a higher threshold, and there was actually parameters that this project was set upon. And then to the point about the segregating of affordable housing units, this is a concern from the very beginning. And I think we had talked to the developers about the possibility of trying to spread out the affordable units. And I'll let Kirsten from Bridge talk about this, but in the end, it just didn't make the most sense to do that. Because of the programming that we want to ensure that we provide for all the residents in these different buildings. I know Bridge and Mission Housing have experience doing that. And two, the financing to ensure that we actually get to the most affordability possible. So I'll let them speak on that, but it is not something that wasn't addressed from the beginning. It was something that we talked about from the beginning, and it's been probably more than a few years now since the parcels have been presented as they are with the standalone buildings. So I do want to give Kirsten a chance to talk about that, or you can go to public comment first and we can come back to this issue.
Okay. And I guess there's some other comments in the comment section here. I guess I'll leave those alone. You can take a look at those yourself, but go ahead.
This is Kirsten. Are you wanting me to chime in right now?
Go ahead, Kirsten.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was muting and unmuting myself for some reason. So I think the question was about, what is our strategy in terms of how we're locating the affordability within the 17 acres. And I know this has been a conversation, and as Jen alluded to, since before we came on board, how this was set up, the parameters were really about how do you make 50% affordable happen. And this development agreement, was really trying to push that affordability. And one of the ways to make that possible is to make the housing that Bridge, Mission, and Habitat are building have access to these funding sources that require buildings to be 100% affordable. So the traditional model of, sorry, I just saw it come in. The traditional model of the inclusionary program is really where the private market rate developer subsidizes a small portion of their building to be affordable. This is a totally different thing. This says, how do you get affordable housing developers like Bridge and Mission that do the full wraparound services that are able to cover these full ranges of affordability and bring them to participate in the project and have them use their skills to access these sources to make that 50% possible and work. And so rather than doing the community integration within the hallways of the residential buildings, we're doing it within the hallways of the project or within the pathways and the parks and the community centers. And I think that Joe and Avalon are equally committed to that goal of community building on site. And hopefully that's reflected in the design of the park as well as the design of the site.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else from the developer team or from the staff want to speak up to answer any of the questions from the public?
I can just add really briefly that, you know, in terms of a desire to provide equitable opportunity for all San Franciscans to be housed, we need to be building housing throughout the city, and particularly in neighborhoods with great transit access and great amenities and great schools. And so really the best thing we can do to help promote equity in the housing field is to build housing with heavily affordable housing. And this project is an amazing step in that direction.
Okay. Let's go to public comment then. General public comment. This is the general public comment for any issue that you like pertaining to this project. Thank you. Jean Barish, you're first.
Sure. Thank you very much. I just want to express my appreciation for all the hard work that you've all been doing over these many years. When John said this has been going on for 60 or 90 meetings, excuse me, it came home to me how hard you people have been working. I have not been coming to as many to all of those meetings, but I just want to tell you how impressed I am with how committed everyone is to what has been going on so far. That said, I hope you continue to work as diligently to continue to assure that all of the issues that were discussed today and have been discussed in the past will be resolved before this agreement is finally signed, sealed, and executed. And I look forward to continuing to participate with you in that process so that this project will not only benefit people who need affordable housing, but also will help City College of San Francisco and will not harm the surrounding neighborhood. So please keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Appreciate that. And I look forward to working with you too. Yanran, you're next.
Hello, this is Jonathan.
Oh, Yanran. Jonathan.
Yeah, I wanted to mention the pour door thing that Mike Aaron's brought up again. I have heard anecdotally that federal funds for deed restricted housing are only available for buildings that are 100% deed restricted. So so I hear the concern about having a pour door, but if integrating the buildings means that we can't use enough funds from the federal government and we'll have less low-income housing, then I don't think that's a good trade-off. I wish it were possible to have a completely integrated project, but I think that's probably constrained by other constraints. And also another speaker and also Mike Aarons in his previous meetings promoted the Fair and Associates TDM and used that as evidence to say that we need 980 parking spaces, but we don't know what assumptions and what model that the Fair TDM that CCSF contracted used. And in particular about the demand for 980 parking spaces, that assumed what they called core TDM, which they said was charging $7 a day for parking. But we don't know whether that changes the $50 per semester parking pass or not, or is City College still going to be offering the cheap $50 a semester pass, in which case of course the $7 a day parking isn't going to change behavior very much if there's a much cheaper option that's $50 a semester. So in my opinion, City College should eliminate that $50 per semester parking pass, except for those who need it, such as people who need to drive because they have a second job or they have childcare that they need to attend to, because we need to I mean, City College really needs to start managing the parking a little bit smarter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next to Christine Hansen.
Hi, I'm going to be reading from an article that was written in 1988. I don't know, I'm going to be skipping around. I don't know how much of this I'm going to get through, but I can send it to anybody that wants to read it. It was written by a man named Kevin Starr. He was a very famous historian. He states he's against Prop L, which was one of the measures that was defeated for building earlier. And he does state that he's aware of the housing needs of his city. But he does say that this Prop L would forever take away from City College the chance to build what it needs most: a library, a bookstore, an auditorium, more classrooms, and student parking. Prop L tells the students and teachers of City College that they must forever remain second-class citizens in a city that has turned its back on them. And then he goes on and he said, City College of San Francisco is a remarkable place. For more than 50 years, City College of San Francisco has been keeping alive the dream of a better life, a better future for generations of aspiring young San Franciscans. City College of San Francisco is truly a symbol of hope in an embattled, increasingly restrictive and elitist society. You do not have to be born in this country. You do not have to have been a straight A student in high school. All you need is hope and discipline, and City College takes you in and gives you the tools to realize your dream. Over the past half century, more than 1 million young San Franciscans have presented themselves to City College and said, give me the tools to make something of myself. The devoted teachers and counselors of City College take time to analyze each student individually. Some students are put on an academic track and prepared for transfer. It goes on, and it's beautiful. And it is what this project is endangering as it is being set up. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. You can put a link to that article in the chat if you like.
I have a PDF. I don't know how to.
Well,
it's not posted. It's from 1988.
Yeah. Okay. Tomasita, you're next. Tomasita. I can't see you anymore, but I think you might be muted still.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go. You have 2 minutes.
2005, and again in this year, the voters of San Francisco funded and approved a performing arts education center and now a science building. These are supposed to be built on the upper lot. The upper lot was never meant to be a parking area. It was always meant to be the space for the Performing Arts Education Center, and now the Science, Technology, Engineering, Arts, and Mathematics building. So those 2 buildings have a right to be built because first of all, the voters approved and funded them, and secondly, we have a right to fulfill our dreams, and our performing artists need a place to perform. And so something new on that deprives us of or thinking that we don't have a right to build what has already been approved for years is just wrong. City College is the only place where people from throughout the city can come and become the people that they dream to be. Whereas there's plenty of other lots throughout the city where this development could be built. So it should not be prioritizing the developers' greed. Instead, the aspirations of the people of San Francisco is what should be honored and fulfilled on this land. We shouldn't even be discussing this because that lower lot needs to continue to be part of the City College campus. Please respect that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tomasita. Let's see, Sam Deutsch is next.
Hi, yeah, my name is Sam. I live in the general area in D8, and I'm just calling to say that I think the last thing that needs to be preserved at this point is a parking lot. I mean, if you look at the location right next to Balboa Park, BART, and Muni, there's really no excuse to having thousands of parking spaces in that area, especially when you consider the climate implications, by encouraging people to drive rather than letting that space be used productively for housing and for small businesses. I really think just doesn't make a lot of sense given the future of San Francisco and, you know, given the housing crisis and everything. So yeah, I think that we should be focusing on the future and focusing on envisioning a more sustainable San Francisco, which is one where people commute via public transit and we don't have massive sprawling parking lots that are used to store inefficient and polluting motor vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Resetting the timer. Madeline Miller, you're next.
Just one bit to clear up here. As you know, I've been at your meetings since the very beginning, so I think I've been to all 61 meetings. And I've said the same thing. You're living next to a college, usually it has been the largest in the country, and you have the equivalent of a whole city of people coming. It's a commuter school. We've kept data. I've been on committees for the 50 years I've been at the college faculty. We have studied parking issues. We have studied BART. We have studied Muni. We pack them in anyway. I don't know how many students over the years tell me they can't get to class on time then because we jam the Muni. We do it already. We jam the BART. We do it already. To put that a little bit, really 1,000 units of parking for a student body of 30,000 a day is not out of kilter. We did studies for years that showed that our students use public transportation far more than any of the other 114 community colleges. I have the data. I keep the data. So don't go into the car shaming thing. We've done the studies. We know what a terrible problem this is for those needy people, the few that still will have to take their cars. We will, if you put us all out on the street, we will crash the BART. We will crash the Muni. We are the city of Hercules coming and going every day. If you want to say, get rid of City College so you can have a nice, quiet neighborhood, say it. Bye.
Okay, thank you. I think that's it. In the comments, Christine was asking if one of the developer team can address Jennifer's question about periods of no CCSF parking during construction. Is there anybody who can, because I thought there was going to be phased construction and there would always be some parking. Am I wrong about that? Perhaps Joe Kirchhoff could speak to that.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Sorry, I was just plugging in my mic here. So yeah, that's something that we are actually working on right now. We've been so let me just walk through the parking phasing plan, the temporary parking phasing plan. The basic premise is that, you know, there's 17-acre site. It's going to be built in 2 phases. So there'll be a time when the phase 1 buildings are under construction and then are built. And during that time when the phase 1 buildings are under construction, the phase 2 lots, the parcels where phase 2 buildings will be being built in the future will be vacant, will be flat, empty pieces of land, and those will be temporary parking lots. Now, as we've talked through the sequencing, I think in other CAC meetings, we've identified there are 2 potential pinch points where those temporary lots won't be available. The first would be at the very beginning of construction. And I think we've described this before. We have to change the grading of the entire site. So the whole, you know, rather than having a big bowl, we're going to fill it in so each of the 4 edges of the site meets the existing grade next door nearby. And so we're going to be pushing, you know, basically pushing the big berm all through the site to fill in the hole. During that time, we may be able to carve off an area for temporary parking, but we may not because of the requirement to to regrade that entire site. So there is a point there where the temporary parking lots might be unavailable. The second potential pinch point is during the construction of phase 2. Now, if all the phase 2 buildings are under construction at the same time, there wouldn't be space for that temporary parking, or there wouldn't be probably enough to have the number that we think we need. So during phase 2 construction is another pinch point. What we've what we are looking into are ways that if one of those pinch points coincides with the time of the start of one of the semesters, the start of the fall or spring semester, which is it shows up in the data as the college's peak parking demand times, that we can come up with a solution. I don't know that I think it would be logistically impossible to have an off-site far away parking lot and a shuttle, just because this is at the beginning of the semester. There would be very little way for the college to let students know that they should go park somewhere else. So what we've talked about is funding so that the college could have a valet service on its existing lots. And so instead of having however many cars fit on the current lot now on the college campus, they could valet that, increase it by usually at least 50%, and come up with the added capacity that would be needed during those peak times that way. So that's something that we've met and talked to the college administration about yesterday, and are hopefully going to be able to work out with them.
Okay, time will tell. Thank you sorry to put you on the spot, but it was a question a lot of people came up with.
It's a good question.
Okay, seeing no more public comment, it looks like we're at the close of the meeting. Is there anything that anybody from the committee would like to express at this time?
Yes, John, Mike Ahrens.
Go ahead, Mike.
A lot of good points have been raised today and information we've received. Is this is the recording going to be available shortly, like tomorrow, the next day of this meeting? Normally it gets posted on the website. Lee, do you know when the recording might be available?
I don't. Sinyan, do you have, I presume we have to work with IT?
Yes. Michael, are you talking about the video of this meeting?
Yes, yes.
We can try as fast as possible. There's some time for Zoom to upload the video to the cloud, and our IT will have to download and process it to upload to YouTube. So there's some time required for that kind of processing. But if we can expedite it, we might be able to do it by end of tomorrow, or at least before Thursday.
End of tomorrow or the next day would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay, so actually on YouTube, I never looked on YouTube. You can just search for Balboa Reservoir and find these videos on YouTube. SF planning, something like that.
So if you go to the planning website, there's a link to the YouTube video of all of the Zoom meetings we had so far. And I think you can find it on YouTube too. I haven't done it, but there's a planning department account.
Okay, last call for anybody to say anything before I adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
All right.
I second that.
All right. I think we don't, by acclamation, aye. All in favor.
And then Lee, we'll be talking in the near term about when the next meeting is, Lee, of the CAC. We'll get notice of that, I assume, John. So
yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.